Lock yourself away with a true crime podcast.
Who is it that's missing?
It's my dad.
Dead Man Running.
They're now searching for a wanted man who may have staged his disappearance to escape justice.
Intrigue, To Catch a Scorpion.
I'm going to try to track down one of the biggest players in this trade in Desperate People.
A very British cult.
They are brainwashing people.
For Most Wanted podcasts, listen on BBC Sounds.
BBC Sounds. Music, radio, podcasts.
Don't know how many times you've been to this ground, Craig, but you never fail to enjoy winning here, do you?
I love it.
Hello, I'm Liam McLeod, and this is a special episode of the Scottish Football Podcast. With the domestic campaign just finished, as we take a brief break from the Euros build-up, and we've got plenty of time to look forward to that over the course of the next week or two, we're going to have a little look back at the season that has just been completed. And what a season it was. There were certainly plenty of goals.
No way, no, is that the big fella? I'm not having that. Substitute goalkeeper unleashes an absolute pile driver.
Into the box goes Lawrence Shankland. The Hearts captain does what he continually does.
Dessers through the legs, goal! That is outstanding from Cyril Dessers.
There's been silverware lifted.
It is all over. Celtic, Scottish Cup winners once again.
And Scottish football being Scottish football, there's even been the odd spot of controversy and managerial mayhem.
I know it's a long way, you know. Sharon, my wife, said, Aberdeen.
Yes, I don't think the likes of Aberdeen and Hibs are going to forget this season particularly quickly, given the managerial upheaval that's been going on at Pittodrie and Easter Road. It's happened elsewhere, of course. And joining me to pick the bones out of all of this and review what was an eventful season are Tom English, BBC Scotland's chief sports writer, my other colleague Alistair Lamont, who, of course, commentator and journalist, and Craig Telfer, host of A View from the Terrace. Craig, firstly, how are you?
Yeah, brilliant, Liam. Thank you very much for having me. Looking forward to talking about some of the high points of the season.
Yeah, I mean, you've certainly enjoyed it. It was a record breaker for your team, Stenhousemuir, was it not?
Yes, it was. It was. It's the best season I've ever had following the club. They've given me two of the best days of my life, memories that'll live with me for the rest of my life. And just any time I'm feeling a bit down about something, I just think, yes, Stenny won the league, and it's just incredible moment, incredible, great group of players, great manager, and just absolutely delighted for everyone at the club.
Yeah, first ever title. Gary Naismith has done a terrific job. They'll be looking to kick on next season. Tom, we're going to obviously touch on highlights, favourite games, all that sort of stuff, players of the season on the podcast today. Is there anything that kind of sticks out to you immediately when you look back at 23-24?
Yes, what stands out for me is that this season lasted about 5 years. And the amount of stuff that happens in all divisions in Scotland every year is mind-boggling. It's not the greatest quality, we know that, but the stories are insane.
All right, Derek Adams.
Oh, hang on. He wasn't on my list. Hang on, he's going on my list right now. It's endless. The more you research it, Liam, the more you think, I'd forgotten that happened. It's just incredible.
Yeah, I mean, I'm talking about Aberdeen and Hibs, but of course Ross County had the problems with their managerial setup across the campaign, and Don Cowie finally ending things on a rather calmer note than we saw under Derek Adams and perhaps Malky Mackay earlier in the season. Al, you have obviously seen a heck of a lot of the Championship. I know you love covering it on a Friday night. Is that something that steps out or sticks out to you over the course of the season?
Yeah, definitely. And you're right, I do love covering it. And when we come to a game of the season, I may or may not go for one of the Championship games I covered. But I know that there's a lot of people wanted Ross County to stay up, partly because of Don Cowie, because I think he does come across as a really good guy. And, talking to people, Brian Graham, for instance, who was working with me on Sunday, he wanted County to stay up just because of Don Cowie primarily. So I can understand that, but I really felt for Wraith Rovers because I really enjoyed their brand of football over the course of the season. And I just, just for that little bit of change, it would be nice to see a couple of teams come up. But nonetheless, a great job done by Don Cowie in the end.
Hey, listen, the more East Coast teams in the Scottish top flight, the better, as far as I'm concerned. Listen, we've got plenty to go over. Obviously, we're going to perhaps keep it simple across the course of the podcast. Got various categories here, and I want nominations from each of the guys for each category, and we'll see how many we can get to through the half hour. Thanks for listening, by the way, and thanks for subscribing if you're doing so. If you're not, please do. It's really simple. Firstly, I'll go around the houses here. We'll start with you, Craig. Your word of the season. Is there a word that you've either heard a lot or that you think sums up the 23-24 campaign? I'm sure you've heard lots.
Yes, I'm going to put on my Stennismuir Football Club hat on again, and the word I would use to sum up this season is finally, because as we mentioned there, it's 140 years that the club have been in business for and have had very little to show for it. And so for all the stars and all the planets to align just as they've done this season, it's been incredible. I mentioned some of the moments that will stick with me for the rest of my life, and I think perhaps the most cathartic and emotional moment was the game against East Fife at the start of April when it was confirmed that the team had won the league. And when it was confirmed that Peterhead had drawn at Bonnyrigg and they mathematically couldn't catch us, just being on the pitch, celebrating it with supporters from across the generations. There's kids there who have just started going to watch the club in recent years, to guys into their pensionable age who have been watching it for decades. And it just felt incredible to share that moment, finally share that moment with that group of supporters. So that was the overriding emotion from me for this season.
Finally, says Craig. Tom?
I'm going to use a word. Well, actually, I'm going to pick 3 words, if I'm allowed to cheat, that are linked to certain things that happened during the season. Rubbish is one word. Derek Adams.
Good. The standard is shocking, really. It's one of the worst games I've ever seen. It's just, I've been back here and I see the standard and I think, wow, any chance? If I'm a spectator and watching that today, I'm thinking, is this what Scottish football's about? The standard's rubbish. And if I'm a paying customer at this moment in time, I'm not coming back to watch that, I tell you that. And, I've left a team down in League 2 that's miles better than this team. Miles. And that's saying something. We had the bottom budget in League 2 and we're 100 times better than this. 100 times.
I mean, who could ever forget that? Waterlogged in honour of Dundee. That was a word that was used prolifically at the time. But the one I would pick more than anything else was incompetent. It's used by Brendan Rodgers after they lost 2-0 against Hearts in March at Tynecastle. He used it about the officials, John Beaton, the VAR, in particular when the Yang red card. And he obviously got a touchline ban after that.
But again, to then look at that from outside and John Beaton to say that is a penalty, and to have it, wow, it really, really poor officiating.
It was kind of one of the turning points, the galvanising moments for Celtic, I think, because they played 12 games after that. They won 10 and they drew 2. So incompetent was, and that's where Celtic were really rocking. They were in trouble. The fans were disaffected. They were angry. Rodgers was not sure-footed at all. So that was a big moment, I think.
What about you, Al?
Yeah, I'll use a couple if that's okay, a little phrase. Title race for me, because for the first time in over a decade, we did have a genuine one. Almost went to the wire until kind of Rangers' late stumbles. Tom's talking there about how Celtic really put the foot to the floor after that defeat at Tynecastle. They didn't look like they were going to really stumble at any stage after that, whereas Rangers obviously dropped points up in Dingwall losing to them for the first time, and then drawing at Dundee straight after that. But they did for a moment look like they were going to become the first side to have sacked their manager mid-season and then go on to win the top flight title. But injuries certainly affected them, maybe a lack of mental strength as well, while Celtic showed a kind of real champions mentality to ultimately win by 8 points, pretty comfortably in the end. But as I say, it was, for a few weeks there, we definitely felt like we had a real title race.
Yes, absolutely. And of course, Rangers can.
Have you got one, Liam?
Well, Liam.
No. This is for you guys to. I am merely here. I am merely here just to stitch everything together.
He hasn't done his research, boys. That's basically.
I've been looking after the Scotland squad today. I've got a few big Scotland games coming up, as Alistair does, of course, over the course of the next few weeks.
For that.
Anyway, let's move on. Listen, no, look, there's plenty. I mean, to be honest with you, I would probably thinking of one word, it's a name, and it's Warnock. Because I think that 5-week spell that Aberdeen had with Neil Warnock at the helm kind of summed up the season that they had. I'm pretty sure that the board, if they had their time again, would have probably stuck with Peter Leven, who drew with Celtic. Then Warnock comes in the next day and didn't win a single league game. And obviously they've ended up in the bottom 6. I'm convinced, for what it's worth, and as I said, this isn't my job to do this. This is for the guys to talk about.
We've not really got time for your bit. Come on, just get
convinced that if Peter Leven was there, they would have been in Europe, not bottom 6. But anyway, that's for a different podcast, perhaps. What about moment of the season? Craig, I mean, it's the risk of going with Steny again.
No.
I guess it's very difficult to look past that for you, but, I'm going to ask you anyway. What's your moment of the season?
I think it's from a game. Ultimately, this moment didn't count for anything, but it was certainly the moment I was watching this match on my couch on the Friday night and actually sprung up at just how incredible this was. This was Scott Brown's goal for Raith Rovers against Dundee United on the 16th of February 2024.
Oh my goodness me! Wow! Well, that goal, and what a goal it was, could have a massive say in the championship title race.
This was at a point in the season where we had a genuine title race in the championship between United and the Rovers, and the game at Starks Park, a pretty dull contest actually up until the very end. But Scott Brown, the ball breaks to him about 30 yards from goal on the volley, and he hits the thing. It's an absolutely stunning parabola that goes into the top of the net. Jack Walton's got no chance, and that closed the gap to a point between the sides. And that was when I'm thinking, yes, I'm one of my best friends, Sean McGuigan, he's a Raith Rovers fan, and I wanted to see Raith Rovers do well. Unfortunately, it wasn't to be, but that moment itself, when it allows you to believe that we really have a genuine contest at the top of the championship, that was a brilliant moment and a stunning goal.
He tried to repeat it against Ross County in the first leg of the playoff final. He was unlucky, actually. He went over the crossbar this time, which I guess 9 times out of 10, that's what happens when Scott Brown hits it. But yeah, it was an incredible goal. What about you, Al?
I'm going to just step out of the domestic realm, if that's okay. I'm going to go for way back in September, October, Scotland qualifying for the Euros. Like Tom said, these kind of things seem like they happened decades ago almost, but it was this season. So beating Cyprus on the 8th of September for a 5th straight qualifying victory, which is, it was unprecedented for Scotland.
McGinn takes a touch and shoots and scores! It's so easy here in Larnaca. John McGinn with a fabulously taken goal.
And so that put us on the kind of precipice of qualifying, and although we then lost to Spain the following month, all that kind of early hard work paid off when we weren't actually even playing as Spain beat Norway. Unfortunately, we haven't won since that game over Cyprus, but hopefully we'll put that right next week, and more importantly, going into the finals in Germany. But just amazing to get a second consecutive Euros.
Tom, difficult look past the national team, I suppose, but you're Irish, so you can pick something else.
Well, yeah, I wouldn't be picking the Irish national team. That's for sure. Wasn't a lot of highlights there. I've got a few, right, quirky ones. Lawrence Shankland, obviously tremendous goal scoring, brilliant player of the year. When he scored the penalty against Hibs, the way he caught that pie that was thrown from the Hibs, took a bite out of it and then flung it back again. I thought that was really, really cool. Santa being booed on to the pitch and then cheered on when he bringing the league trophy out. I thought that was a lovely moment and quite clever the way Celtic did it, and it made me laugh. Duncan Ferguson, when he was, this thing on Sportsnet on Saturday that Big Kenny does about people picking their music, he got Duncan Ferguson to do it, which was a surprise. But then his first song was Folsom Prison Blues by Johnny Cash. And Duncan Ferguson says, in the song, the guy shot a guy in Reno. I just bumped into a guy at Ibrox. So I thought that was a lovely moment. But my moment would be Ali Adams.
Yeah.
Ali Adams, the Arbroath reserve goalkeeper, lashing one in. And I just thought it was the most amazing goal. The moment went viral. I loved it. As described, and I won't say the word because it's one word. Thunder is the first part of it. There's a rude word. There's a second part of it. And only Scottish people, I've tried saying this word, but I can't get the right intonation. It's only Scottish people can pull this off. And they say it magnificently. But Ali Adams' quote afterwards when he said, did you, being a goalkeeper, do you have any sympathy for the Raith Rovers goalkeeper that night, scoring against him from such 35 yards? And he said, absolutely not. Get it up him. Have some of that. That's brilliant. That's also my quote of the season, by the way.
Yeah. It was quite a moment for him personally. I noticed he wasn't invited to their end of season awards, which seems a bit harsh given those exploits. Anyway, you'll notice as well that if this podcast drags on a little bit longer than planned, it's because when I asked Tom for one moment of the season or one word, he's coming up with several of them, which,
Sorry.
You've over-prepped. If I've under-prepped...
Never use one word when 20 will do. That's Tommy Rush's
exactly.
maxim.
Listen, player of the season, person of the season, doesn't have to be a player, it could be a person of the season as well, because there's enough player of the year awards that we see, and there's always contention when it comes to these sort of things. I just wonder who the player or person of the season is for you, Tom, and just one, please, if you don't mind.
Oh, God.
We're going to quickly have to narrow this down.
Okay, look, we can look at all the obvious ones, right? I'm going to discount all of them. Rodgers, McInnes, McGlynn, Shankland, all of these guys, Miofsky. I'm actually going to pick somebody that you mentioned earlier, Peter Leven.
Yep.
Left field for sure. But look at the state of Aberdeen when he took over. Look at the absolute train wreck that it was under the previous incumbent, which is a total nonsense, as you say. And everything that Warnock said that Aberdeen were, weak, couldn't defend, this, that and the other. Leven, in the blink of an eye, fixed it all. They suddenly became a team that were tough, became a team that could defend, became a proud and interesting team to watch. Goal scorers, restored Miofsky, who somehow Warnock ruined. I mean, how could you ruin Bojan Miofsky? He's a brilliant player. Warnock managed to do that. So I would say, I know it's a weird one, but outside of the obvious ones, I'd say Peter Leven. I think he was brilliant.
Yeah, I mean, people will hear that and they'll say, well, a lot of the games were against bottom six sides, but actually that Scottish Cup semi-final against Celtic, when they put it up to Celtic that day, and save for a couple of defensive lapses, they could easily have won that match. And as I said earlier, he probably should have had the opportunity to take the team to the end of the season from an earlier point. Craig, what about you?
I perhaps said Tom's touched on having John McGlynn. I've gone Falkirk, about to say Callum Morrison, the Falkirk's attacker. He scored 25 goals in 41 appearances for Falkirk. And it wasn't just Falkirk were smashing teams over the course of the season, but these goals were opening goals, equalisers, winning goals. And there was a goal he scored against Montrose in a 3-2 win in September, where it was in injury time, where he hit the ball into the top corner from 35 yards. Absolutely magnificent goal. And he's the kind of player that drags you to the edge of your seat, because every time he's on the ball, you just know something exciting is going to happen. And it was an incredible season for Falkirk. They've had 5 long, difficult years trying to get out of League One, but this was the season where they finally managed to do it. They went unbeaten, and I think the club are in a far, far better place than they were when they went down, and a lot of that has to do with John McGlynn, but a lot of it has to do with Callum Morrison as well. So I'm really interested to see how he and his teammates get on next season, but Morrison's my player of the season. Fantastic campaign.
Yeah, I mean, he was someone, when I saw him breaking through at Hearts as a youngster, I thought, this guy's going to go far. And of course, he's had to drop down a league or two with Falkirk in recent times, and you're right, he lit up League One. I don't think there's any doubt about that. Al, does your player or person come from your championship coverage, or is it with the national team? What are you thinking?
No, but I did think about John McGlynn as well, because I think for all the reasons that Craig just mentioned, to get Falkirk definitely a massive sleeping giant out of League One at last, because they had struggled to do so up until now. So I think that's a brilliant achievement. But I'm going to go for an even less imaginative choice. You'll be all surprised to hear. I'm going to go for Matt O'Reilly.
Back heel flick to Kyogo, 25 yards out, then onto O'Reilly, edge of the box. He's going to shoot with the right foot. Oh, it's sensational! It's utterly sensational from Matt O'Reilly. He smashes it.
Just because I think he was, I know he was pipped by Lon Shanklin to Player of the Year, understandably. But I just think O'Reilly, in a season where Celtic were rarely absolutely brilliant, certainly in comparison to last season, I just thought, although he had a dip in the middle of the season, I think he was pivotal to their success, starting the season really well and refinding his form just when Celtic needed someone to step up. 8 goals in his last 10 matches. I suppose the likelihood is he will go in the summer, but when he does go, it'll be for massive money. And Celtic, again, finding a real gem for very little money, and they're going to make a massive profit. I know the fans would obviously prefer him to stay, and maybe he will, who knows. But I just thought he's a touch of real class in the Celtic midfield. Loved watching him play. And so he's my player of the season.
They'll be hoping he's not played his last game, of course. Matt O'Reilly, we shall see. Just a couple of nods as well. And you can't put them as player of the person of the season because they didn't take part in the full campaign. But I think James Forrest and Craig Gordon, it's worth noting to them.
Yeah.
Both in the national side, both in the squad for the provisional squad for the European Championship finals. James Forrest looked to be out the door at Celtic. Craig Gordon coming back from his latest serious injury, and at his age as well, at the age of 41, with an opportunity to potentially add to his 74 caps before and then potentially in Germany as well. And James Forrest's resurrection all the way through to starting the Scottish Cup final and winning his 24th major honour. He's now just one behind Bobby Lennox and the club record. So just a little nod to those two. What about game of the season then? I mean, I've seen a couple of really incredible games this campaign. My favourite games of last season were probably the last two I covered, which was the playoff final second leg in Dingwall, which saw Ross County in that jaw-dropping recovery. And then the next game I covered was Oslo, which, the two of them, and the game in Oslo was dreadful, but, who cares? The last few minutes just completely wiped out the memory of the rest of it. This season, the 3-3 Rangers-Celtic game at Ibrox, the Scottish Cup semi-final between Aberdeen and Celtic, obviously, Celtic have won it on the penalty shootout, but it was an enthralling match, and I think even the Aberdeen supporters left that stadium that day, down that they'd lost, but actually encouraged by what the team showed that day. Al, what was your favourite game of the season?
I thought you weren't going to have your own choices, and that's the last two categories.
Well, now I had a chance to think about it. I've just ego. I've had a chance to think about it.
Ego coming out.
Not only that, but you've just stolen one of my potential choices there for game of the season with the
That's why I did it. That's why I did it.
So,
in the words of Ali Adams, get it right up you.
You're not allowed to say that on the BBC. That's you overstepped the mark. Right. So what I will go for, a championship match, and I'll go for one of Wraith Rovers' kind of late comebacks that they were absolutely famous for, particularly the start or the opening part of the season. The 4-3 game against Partick Thistle, which we covered up at Starks Park. Just one of these completely classic Friday night championship encounter for me. Wraith 2-0 up at half time, but then Thistle, who looked out of it, they got Dan O'Reilly own goal. Brian Graham obviously got on the score sheet with a penalty to draw them level. Then Blair Alston, who almost became their man in the season towards the end there in the playoffs, he turns it round with just 20 to play, and you think, oh well, that's that. But Wraith Rovers had other ideas. Callum Smith and then Sam Stanton, who was phenomenal for them over the course of the season. Comes up to score, I think it was about 8 minutes to go to win it for them. So yeah, that was, in terms of the ones I commentated on particularly, as well as that 3-3 at Hampden in the semi-final, the Wraith Rovers 4, Partick Thistle 3 was a classic.
I did the playoff match there between Wraith Rovers and Partick Thistle for telly, and I was getting dogs abuse for being on the coverage. Where's Al Lamont, they said. They were shouting, where's Al Lamont? Al Lamont was on holiday. That's why I was covering it. It's the only reason I was covering it. You'll get your man back for the first championship coverage of next season. Don't worry about that. Game of the season, Tom English.
That 4-3 game, the Wraith Partick Thistle game, was sensational, as were the 2 3-all draws. Cup semi-final and the game at Ibrox, the Old Firm game. I wasn't at the Wraith Partick Thistle game, so I'm making it that I had to be at the game, right? And on that basis, I'd probably say the Old Firm game at Ibrox, 3-all.
Now it's Matondo, chips it towards goal! What the finish! What a finish from Robbie
I thought that was incredibly dramatic, even though there was no away fans there. The fact that Celtic went 2-0 up, Ibrox, you could have heard a pin drop, and then it became a very, very different stadium. And the late goals at the end, I just thought that was incredible drama.
What about you, Craig?
I'm going for the most high-stakes, high-tension game of the season, and that was Stranraer 3, East Kilbride 1 in the League 2 playoff final second leg. You're laughing, Tom, but honestly,
No, I hear you.
This game had absolutely everything. There's one of the goal of the season contenders from Grant Gallagher, a dipping volley from the edge of the area. There was some incredible misses from East Kilbride. They should have been out of sight before they even went into extra time. Goals in the 117th minute, goals in the 121st minute, a melee at the end with 2 red cards, pitch invasions, blue smoke bombs. It's incredible commentary on Stranraer TV. If you haven't seen these highlights, go and watch them.
Is this their version of the famous Norwegian commentary?
That's
so
right.
They start listing all these East Kilbride celebrities.
That's tremendous.
That's right. Stranraer TV, in terms of a lower league highlights package, Stranraer have consistently been the best in the division, and it was just an incredible game. Stranraer are a football club I've got a lot of time for, and I'm delighted to see they stayed in the SPFL, and hard luck to East Kilbride, but it just shows you if you don't put away your chances, you don't win these games, so they'll just have to go again next season. But just the game had everything. Highly recommend it. Brilliant game of football.
Stranraer described that as the biggest game in their history, and absolutely, because we've seen sides drop out of the SPFL into the Lowland or Highland League, and they toil. They're not, perhaps, I know Brecon City have been knocking on the door a little bit, but a lot of the other clubs have sunk without a trace.
Yeah.
So congratulations to them, that's for sure. Your least favourite thing about the season? Now, it's not allowed to be the video assistant, because this was done in January during the winter break, during the podcast, and everyone said VAR. So you guys have had to think about something other than VAR. I can talk about VAR, and I'm going to just very briefly touch on it in a way that I think they could improve it from next season onwards, and they're going to have to look at it. I know England are looking at it as well. Sweden have turned their noses up at it, and then, the supporters' experience is probably what we need to look at in many ways, not just the players and the coaching staff and all that. Is there an argument potentially, and I'm not going to get into a debate about it, but is there an argument potentially to maybe set a 1-minute timer on decisions that are taking so long to come to? If a referee in the video room is sitting there watching replays, do we give them 60 seconds? And if they've not come to a decision after 60 seconds, it's obviously not clear and obvious, and we move on. Who knows? We'll find out. There'll be plenty more to discuss about it next campaign, I would have thought. Tom, out with VAR. What's your least favourite thing about the season?
I won't labour the Neil Warnock point, but I thought that was a complete farrago.
So you're saying it's the least favourite thing about the season, but you loved getting stuck into that.
I did, but
Kenny.
I didn't love getting into it, because I think Aberdeen deserved better than that. Now, it's their own fault for appointing him. And I kind of pointed out that this is actually probably not the right way to go, but Aberdeen fans, well, it's those ones on social media, and it's not all Aberdeen fans. Obviously, it's probably a very small minority of Aberdeen fans, came after me for criticising the great showman, the box office hero. He was a disaster, but let's move on from him. Something more serious right at the end of the season, Inverness, Caledonian Thistle, moving the training base to Fife. I thought that was profoundly depressing. Still is. It's brilliant to see the local community rising up against it, the local paper, Inverness Courier, fantastic front page. This is a way to run yet. I just thought that was desperately sad and worrying and pitiful.
That's what I had as well. I had Inverness, Caledonian Thistle moving their base to Kelty Hearts. It feels like the club are being run by people that don't get it. And I think that the idea of taking the club, removing that visibility from Inverness and basing them in the Central Belt with the aim of trying to attract players, I don't think it will work. I think you're taking a short-term, you're looking for some short-term gain that's going to have massive ramifications for the club. And it feels quite insulting to people from Inverness and the community and the fan base. And I can only echo Tom's points. It did seem quite depressing.
I've spoken to a few people who have connections with Cali Thistle, and some of them, have made big impressions at Cali Thistle over the years, and they are aghast at what's happening there. And as Tom says, that's a story that's going to keep running. Alistair, have we got something different to that?
Well, I mean, that's a difficult one to disagree with, really, I have to say. But I've gone for something a bit less serious, probably. But it's just something that gets on my nerves a bit.
Oh, here we go.
Watching games, commentating on games, or just watching them as a fan or whatever. And I think it's a growing issue in Scottish football. And I'll tell you what, it's defenders who go down under the slightest little bit of physical contact, and referees always falling for it and giving them a foul, giving them a free kick. I just think it just seems to be creeping at our game, just in the same way as, I suppose, we always prided ourselves for many years on there not being diving and stuff like that, and that has come into it. And this is essentially diving as well. It's, as I say, where the defenders are, big guys, 6 foot plus, massive athletes, and they feel a touch in their back and they hit the deck and they get free kicks, and it does my head in.
You're talking about the size of these guys, and yet you're willing to go on to a national podcast and get stuck into them as well. You better be careful next season.
I'm not scared.
Hard as nails, Al. Hard as nails.
Oh, listen, we're just about out of time, I think, but I just want to go around the guys one more time just to see if there's anything that perhaps you want to get off your chest about the season. Of course you do.
Well,
of course you do. Why don't we start with you then?
Well, no,
in fact, this could be a whole different podcast.
No, there's another award that you're missing out, and I don't even know what the title of this award is, but it's a kind of the quintessential Scottish football award, as in like what, that kind of sense. Mike, and in honour of Craig, Michael Palin congratulating Stenhouse Muir. This kind of stuff, The Albanian president running around the beach shouting "Hail, hail." Stephen King backing Bucky Thistle, great novel of Stephen King. This kind of stuff, this quirky lunacy that happens. There's so much of that. I'll shut up now because I've got a long list and we need to wrap it up soonish.
See when we things start drying up after the European Championship, we can maybe sit down with you, Tom, and get the rest of your list there.
Do you know what? I keep a note every time I see something like this. I have a notebook of quirk and I write them all down. That's hence I'm going to do a special podcast on this, Liam, but maybe for another day, or maybe not.
Yeah, well, maybe next time I'm struggling with insomnia, you can give me a shout with that one. Craig, anything else you would like to point out about the season that's just finished? Is there anything that sticks out to you out with all the drama?
I don't think the season's quite finished yet. It's the Euros that I'm really looking forward to. I know I'm kind of cheating.
Are you going out?
Yes, I am. I'm lucky enough to be going out for the 3 games, so I cannot wait for it. It just feels like all roads are leading to Munich for that first game against Germany, and I don't think that. I think we've got a decent chance of making an impact at the Euros. I'm quietly confident that we will progress past the group stages. I mean, it's never been easier to do that, so we're kind of doing that by default. But I do think that we've got a chance of doing something good out in Germany.
I remember coming home from school and sitting down, getting nice and comfy to watch Costa Rica, Scotland in the first match of the World Cup in Italy. And I remember my old man said after the match, he was shaking his head. He says, "I've seen this all before." So I always go into these things with a little bit of trepidation. Al, final word.
No, just like Craig, I mean, I've really enjoyed the season as a whole. Like Tom said at the start, in the kind of echoing the sentiment of Derek Adams, the quality is not always the best, but I mean, give me the Scottish football leagues over just about any other. Definitely prefer watching them than any other. So enjoyed the season, and just hopefully we've got something more over the next month to really get excited about when we all head to Germany.
Yeah, on the national team, just before we wrap up, a pointer to our coverage that we've got coming up. We've got the 2 friendly matches. So Gibraltar against Scotland is going to be live on BBC Radio Scotland on Sports Sound. It's a 5 o'clock kickoff on Monday. And then you've got the Finland game at Hampden. It's live on the radio. It's live on the television as well. And then it is all about Munich and Germany against Scotland as Steve Clarke's team help open the European Championship finals. Games against Switzerland and Hungary to come in Cologne and Stuttgart as well. So full coverage across the BBC. Highlights will be available as well. And we'll have lots of Scottish football podcasts for you too across the next few weeks. But we better wrap up for now before the new season starts, which it won't be too long, will it? League Cup groups, the draw's being made. The draw's being made for the League Cup groups this Wednesday, which is quite incredible. So as you're listening to this, the draw might well have just been made. My thanks to Tom, Al and Craig for joining me today, and thank you for listening. If there's anything we've missed in our review of the season, I'm sure there is, but if you'd like to add your nominations to any of the categories discussed, you can get in touch. Our email address is scottishfootball@bbc.co.uk. That's scottishfootball@bbc.co.uk, and we'll maybe give them a little mention in a podcast that we'll be recording over the course of the next week or two. The domestic season may be over. It is not long until January, so stick with us. Bye for now.
Sacked in the Morning is back.
I got the ball and I put it on the spot, and as I got up, it was literally the best feeling I've ever had. And believe me, I spent a lot of money on feelings in my life.
Joining Craig Levine and myself, Amy Irons, will be some of football's top managers, best characters and most colourful players as we reveal what exactly goes on inside the dugouts and dressing rooms up and down the country.
We had a lad the other week and I saw him, he was playing, the first half he was playing the opposite wing. He had a set of gloves on and short sleeves. And I thought to myself, I can't wait till next half till he comes near me.
As the manager comes in, he smashes the door open, the jacket's off, shirt sleeves are up. We're thinking, here we go. We're all nudging each other like school kids and giggling.
Sacked in the Morning. Listen now on BBC Sounds.